checking. And the last time they had the happiness process, especially have people who never leave their own base, so they don't even have taking a walk as a happiness process. You've never seen people that solid, because I've seen people from senior management in later years, and the leader in the amount of solidity was Norman Starkey. My nickname for Norman Starkey, by the way, is Mr. Solidity. The guy is so solid, you could cut with a knife in his space. I mean, it's that solid, the guy is.
I'll go through doors.
I mean, I can tell you, anyway, so these guys, and of course they're on a dwindling spiral now, and my sympathies for them. Actually, Elridge described their fate. There's one of the Knots Bolton, which I won't mention here, but Elridge mentioned their fate of those people. So personally, I can only have the deepest amount of pity for those misguided characters. At any rate, so these are the grades up to grade 2. Grade 3 has to do with change. There's a process. Elridge decided to pilot various routines, and one of them was routine 3, and he made various revision, and revision A, B, C, D, and then revision H, R3H became the core thing about change, and these are processes that have to do with change, and of course, unexpected, unwanted, unpredictable change cause RC break, and this is what that level handle. Then grade 4, which is the service facsimiles and fixed conditions. Now that technology was developed on the briefing course mostly between 63 and 65. And this is something very interesting. The facsimile, it's a fixed concept that the person generates, and this is what makes it very different, and this is why it's very resistive, because it is not generated by the bank. It's generated by the person himself as a stable data. And there's an article that I'm preparing, and the working title of that article is The Stable Datum Conundrum. Maybe it will save your life, but maybe it will be at the cost of your own sanity. Because if you read carefully what Elridge says about the stable datum covered in the problems of work, is that when there's a great amount of chaos, it's important to choose a stable datum to overcome it, otherwise you will become overwhelmed and be taken away by the tide. So you have to take a stable datum. Any stable datum will do. Of course, some will be better than others. It's the same thing. The tsunami comes, it's a surprise, you got to grab at whatever you find. It might not be the best thing, but you hold on to what you find. And some people will make better choice than others. Obviously, it's not a well-planned or thought-of choice because it's a stable datum and it's elected as a solution. And because there's not been a lot of considerations and pondering and it's not been well studied, it can very well have a lot of problem and it may not be workable in the long run. But it has become your stable datum. What happened is, once a person has elected a stable datum, because it has proven successful, they sometimes become fixated or interiorized into it and they use it as a mechanism. So that becomes a habit. That's where you're starting to tread in dangerous water, but you're not yet at a service facsimile. So this, one can see this in some people who are completely not in control of their bank. They even have this fancy name in psychology where people have this compulsion to do something. Like I saw this girl on TV once, and she said she's got to do a lot of ritual things because she's got this thing, she's got to tap her legs 6 times before she can get up, you know. Or she's got to swallow 8 times before she can answer the door, you know. Some people have those weird things. Well, it comes out of some earlier stable datum that's been forgotten and it has become compulsive, and because the person is very low on the tone scale, they're very much the effect of it, and especially they don't know any of the mechanics. However, in less pathological case, a person will simply have a habit and people will maybe say it's a bad habit or it's his habit or it's the way he is, you know. So sometimes it's not that bad. So this becomes a habit, but then when there's a lot of resistance that's given to it because it doesn't work in that circumstance, then the person will use it, will try to use it very hard, and that's when it becomes a service facsimile. The person would then use it to make others wrong and to make himself right. And there's actually there's three main brackets mentioned in service facsimiles in grade 4 technology. Make yourself right, make others wrong. Dominate, avoid domination. And then
assist your survival and hinder
assist your survival, injure the survival of others. There are other aspects of it also beyond that, but these are the core three things, and this is what happens with the service facsimile, and this is what happened with people when they then become fixated in an ideology. And this is why when someone has gone to that level, to convince them, convert them, actually this is how people get converted. There's a tape in 1961, it's actually funny, Elrich says, you have someone, and I don't quite remember the exact allegory Elrich makes, but I'm going to make a similar one if it's not the same one. He says, you go left, and you're going to be chopped into tiny bits. You go right, and you're going to be boiled and alive. What do you choose? You choose religion. Because it will do the confronting for you. And this is the same thing. A service facsimile has most of the characteristic of an identity. It can actually replace a person. And some people actually work on complete automatic because they've got this identity of facsimile taking their place and doing the reasoning. And everything will work according to that. And typically what happens is someone, and you can see that why so many reform alcoholics become Jesus freaks or whatever religious zealot, and I won't mention a world leader who falls in that category, who become the elect at datum, and then this becomes their answer, and therefore they are convinced they're doing the right thing, and this is what drives their entire life, and they'll be blinder than a bat into seeing any other viewpoint. They will die under torture rather than change their view, no matter how wrong and unworkable it is, and they're unable to see it. Talk about a blinding spot. It's a blinding spot to end all blinding spots, because it's an idea that was put by the person, and for them to remove that stable datum, it is to face the uncomfortable. There was this huge problem they couldn't confront, and the stable datum solved it all, and it does the confronting for them. They don't have to confront. Therefore, that does the comfort to them, settled. You don't turn over that step. That's like, as they say, turning the iron in the wound. I don't know if it's an expression in English. There's an expression in French where when you say going over and rehashing the same painful thing, you turn like if you had a sword, if you turn it into where you've been wounded. So I think you understand the expressions. I'm not quite sure the correct expression in English. Anyway, so this is what you find in those fixed ideas.
Twisting the knife in the wound.
Yes.
Yeah, that's ours. Twist the knife in a wound.
So basically, that's what happened is the person will not want to confront, and this is why you have a lot of people having fixed ideas in a free zone. That's exactly what happened. It may not be quite at the level of service facsimile, but it has at least it's at one of the intermediary stage at least. And this is why it's a waste of time with most people to discuss, because, I mean, you may as well try to convert the Pope to Judaism, or get Osama bin Laden to become a reborn Christian. I mean, it's simply absurd. It's simply not going to happen, because they've got their stable datum, and that's what their whole life is based on. And of course, as time goes, acknowledging that you've been wrong means that you have gone the wrong way all the way until now. And that takes a hell of a lot of responsibility to accept, and you need to be very high on the tone scale to take responsibility for having made that mistake. So this is a basic rundown of grades, and if we go at the ability attested, you've got grade 0, which is able to communicate to anyone on anything and receive such communication. Grade 1, the ability to see the cause of problem and to solve them. Grade 2, relief from the upsets of the past and what others have done to oneself. And then grade 3, the ability to face change and ability to do new things. And then grade 4, fixed conditions in life, one is free from fixed conditions and ideas in life. And as I said, the abilities gained are not meant to be absolute, because I remember David Mayo gave a lecture after he left the church mentioning some disappointment on various things, and I think he didn't quite get that point right. And I mean, he was a person with great amount of skill, and by the way, he was not one of the original class 12s, by the way. He was trained by the first class 12s. He was from, let's say, the second batch. But he was someone differently, who had a lot of experience and knowledge, and he was mentioning validly that there's too much of a PR going on for incredible results. And it is true that incredible results happen, but they're not always so. It's actually the same as infomercials. You watch infomercials, and this person say, I became a millionaire doing this plan, or I lost 100 pounds in 6 months, or whatever else. And in very small it's written, results not typical. They had to do that after they had too many lawsuits against them. Results not typical. And it is the same. So results happen, great results are expected to happen in all cases. I would say that. If someone doesn't get great result, there's something wrong, because not getting great result is a bad indicator, and therefore you need to handle it. But to be able to have wow gains that you're on cloud 9 and you're able to float in the air and exert with full perception and able to lift, to move your house 6 feet without touching it, that's a little bit of an exaggeration. Some people might be able to do it, that I can't say, but one should not do it. But of course, it's a great wrench tool to get a lot of money pouring in to use those things. Just like those guys are doing in infomercials. It's written in very small. Most people are too short-sighted to even see that little caption. And of course, they all say how great things are, and actually, same thing. To finish on the infomercial, half of those who say this and this happened, they're paid actors. It didn't even happen to them in the first place. So on the grades, you get a result. The idea of the grade chart is that you key out a major part of your bank stably. And it's like you're building a pyramid. So you've removed this, so that key out is there to stay, and then the second level of the pyramid, and so on up to the grades. Now, the exact definition of that level of release may be hard to put in words. So LRH has found that you put it in words by getting a person to attest, I can communicate to everyone on anything. And as I said, maybe this guy's got a problem talking to naked strippers on Saturday. I'm sorry, maybe it's a bad example. I don't go to see strippers in case someone see that video and start to make any comment, because I know some people jump to conclusions.
We won't tell your wife.
They have
Oh,
trouble.
okay, say she's got no problem. She would have no such problem in anything. She would probably ask me to come with me if I was to school. So so basically one get that ability. Same thing with problem. Ability to solve problems, see the cause of problem, has no problem. This can be relative because obviously 6 months later when the guy has been fired from his job, his wife turned out to have been having an affair with his best friend for the last 2 years in secret, and that some other, his investment stock market has all conked out because he invested in the wrong company, then you may find that he has indeed a problem. Does that mean that his grade 1 is BS? Of course not. He has validly achieved grade 1. He has problem now. So he needs to have auditing, and actually the fact is, if someone becomes PTS, he will obviously have problem, no matter where he is on the grade chart, because the definition of PTS is someone who has a problem. Essentially, PTS is someone who's the adverse effect of things, and the anatomy of it is PTS. And this is actually one thing that is not addressed in the free zone at all, PTSness. It's something that's very much in demand to be addressed. The most in-depth amount of data on the subject of PTSness is in the 1975 lectures by Elrich on the special rundown, which later became called the New Vitality Rundown, which was held in Daytona Beach. I've listened to all those lectures, and by the way, I've listened to the masters. When I studied that course at Flag, I was the only one who did that course for a number of years, because after Dyntic Claire Bolton came in '78, nobody did Dynetics because everyone, quote unquote, was clear, so they said. At any rate, so Dynetics became almost not used, at least the specialized form of it, because this has to be done after you've completed the basic Dynetic program, and basically everyone had tested Claire before back then. So I did that course, and the only tapes they had at Flag were the masters. These were the masters. So this way I'm totally sure that these were unaltered because they're masters. And there's even one point that's quite interesting, where LRH make a little faux pas, talking about political interference with the government of Curaçao, which he felt it was probably improper for him to mention it, because who knows is going to listen to that tape in the future. And then you hear him pause and then turn to the guy next to him and say, "You'll have to cut that off, boy." "Yes, you will." And that's an example of something that was later spliced off the tape, but was obviously in that first conference. And by the way, I had some of my friends that were in those conferences. Actually, there was even a girl that was my CS for a while, and she said she couldn't believe it. She asked a question about the CS53 use of, and Elrage gave a very lengthy, expletive answer, which part of it became a Bolton CS53 use of. And she couldn't believe that she had received that long and detailed explanation, because she was only a class 4 auditor. And there you have Elrage giving a full technical briefing on the CS53 and how to use it and what to do and not to do. At any rate, PTS is something that will cause someone to show evidence of outgrades, and doesn't mean someone is suddenly out on grades, because handle the PTS situation and then whoops, no problems anymore. So this is incidentally a technology that's been lost, and that needs to be done at any point that the person needs. And if the person is the adverse effect of things, like he has the same problem with the same people, he feels the adverse effect of them, he needs PTS. And there's a particular group in the free zone that's well known for ignoring this, because you look at all the technology developed by that group, and then you find PTS. They keep talking about a whole track suppressive that's responsible for all evil ever done in the entire universe since the beginning. And they keep running him over and over, over and over. And it's fine, you can do all sort of process to run him, but Where's the PTS handling? Because obviously, I mean, if someone is the biggest suppressive that ever was in the history of the universe, and you became PTS to him, what do you need to do technically? You need to do PTS handling. And I see none of that. Not even remotely. Not wrongly done, omitted. So that's one other thing wrong. And this is a technology that's omitted in a lot of other places. Like you see people say they're auditing away on Sonax, but they are afraid to talk to anyone because of the church. They're PTS to the church. And I can say the church has become a suppressive group. In fact, it has all, if you read the definition of a suppressive group and the characteristic of a suppressive group, the current Church of Scientology has all those attributes. And actually, you look at David Miscavige, and boy, there's only one point that I could not prove that he has not met on the 1966 Antisocial Personality Bulletin. He's got them all. I mean, and then of course they leave him in place because typically when someone is PTS, is the adverse effect of it, and that becomes. This is why you've got the battered wife syndrome, because the poor girl is so affect of the guy that she'll never turning him for abuse. She'll let herself be murdered and abused. She will continue to live even though he's beating the hell out of her. She's PTS. So those people are PTS to the church, and this is the first thing that should be done to people who consider getting the bridge, is PTS handling, because there's no way they will make stable gains, because Elrich says, and this is one thing very clear, and this other group, the guy who wrote that technology says, if someone roller coasters, he's got whatever on flat on that level. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Elrich says, and I quote, there's one and only one reason for roller coaster, and that is PTS. It's actually part of the famous movie, The Secret of Flag Results. And this is one of the big points that's made about the senior CS that handles the guy who wants to do an unusual solution, because the PTS roller coaster, so they've got to find something new. And the guy says, she roller coaster, she's PTS. And he says, well, we didn't find any. Well, you didn't find it, that's all it means, he says. And then he started to give verbatim and quote bulletin after bulletin. And I can do the same, like bulletin, 10 August 1973. There are no other reason for roller coaster and loss of gains. That's one of the most fundamental bulletins on PTS. And so that's one thing very important, and because the church used to be a good group, or that you still believe in its goals, you can still be the adverse effect of it in PTS, and this has to be addressed. And to be addressed, that's another thing where PTS handling has been completely weird out. I mean, not only warped, but weird out in the church, where they feel they have to disconnect. And disconnect simply means you disconnect from them, at least in your mind. But no, they've got to write a destructive disconnect letter. Just like they used to do back in the 70s, people didn't understand it. They even wrote a bulletin against that, but then they've forgotten that bulletin, because that bulletin was simply compiled from his orders. You see, Elrich would give briefing to people. See, the way bulletins were written, and there's so many misconceptions of free zone, they find it hard to believe. Most bulletins, after Elrich had a heart attack in 71, was he gave instruction, write bulletin. Sometimes it could be as short as, I want you to write a bulletin compiling all processes that address each level, like grade 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and put a bulletin listing all the process with triple flows. That could be as short as he does, or he gives a full briefing on how you need to do this and that, and then you do this. Integrity processing is an example. He gave lengthy briefing to Brian Livingston, which was a class 12, giving the exact details on integrity processing. And those, because they were all taken from the detailed notes that Brian Livingston had taken from the briefing given by Elrich on subject, they were reissued as VTB and later forgotten, cancelled. when this is simply lost technology, because this was completely closed. I mean, Brian Livingston was a class 12. He was certainly not someone who was going to invent tech. The class 12 were taught to preserve the tech, not to invent it. So, same thing here is you have the idea that you have all sort of ideas going around on how Elrich wrote Bulletin, and he simply, most of the time, dictated parts, sometimes little, sometimes much, and other people issued for him. This is why he did so much, because Elrich spent the bulk of his time managing money lines and the Scientology network. That took a lot of his time, and he could not have a lot of time working on tech lines, so therefore he had people doing as much as possible for him. And most people would be very correct in writing what he had written. And so therefore starting to say, he wrote this, he didn't write them. Either you can say the viewpoint from 1971, he wrote everything, or you write nothing, depending on the viewpoint. But the thing to really look at is, does it align with the tech? If it aligns with the tech, you know, authorship is not so relevant, because otherwise it means you're fixated on one individual, L. Ron Hubbard. And it's great that he discovered and developed that subject, but we should not be fixated on it, because he never claimed to be infallible, he never claimed to be deity, he never claimed to be perfect. And he was neither of the three, and he never claimed to be either of the three. So therefore, why do you have to believe everything because he wrote it? Actually, the correct viewpoint is understand the technology, follow the technology, and understand why you're doing it, and then you will all never be wrong. And I've never found on anything significant or appreciable where Elrich was ever wrong in technical matters. But I always ensured that I would never audit something, and this is why I became such a star auditor. I never audited anything without fully understanding why it was so. And too often I've seen auditors, and this is why the auditors can be coaxed by RTC to do all these bizarre things, because they've been taught to do it because you're told. And me, I was different from others, because I would never do something because I was told. I would do it because I knew it was right, and I could understand fully why it was right. There's a few times when I did not quite agree with it, I was dubious that this was correct, but when it was a class 12 CS, I was willing to take his word for it, say, well, we'll see. And since that class 12 CS was a lot more experienced than I was, he was right in every single instance, and I became a better auditor as a result. So the grades are meant to be keyouts on the basic levels of the bank. So then you reach a level called grade 4, where you have keyed out a major part of your case, and this will be relatively stable. At this point, well, you would have either done Dynetics earlier, or you're going to do it now. So I'm going to explain Dynetics. So Dynetics was originally, of course, developed in 1950. It became an approach difficult to get really great results on, because it would take a lot of judgment for the auditor to be able to guess what to explore, where to guide the PC. You would be basically blind, and auditors tended to have as much result as they were experienced, intelligent, and capable. Elrich refined things considerably in 1963 by making additional advancements on the briefing course, and then he made a list of more strict commands and was able to get greater results on a lot more auditors and make it a lot simpler and more predictable on how people audited.
Sure.
Yes.
Looks like we got about 18 minutes left.
Okay.
So could we maybe start a question and answer on this part?
Okay.
We can start into Dynetics, maybe the OT levels on a later lecture.
Okay, that's fine. I'll just wrap up
Sure,
on
go ahead.
a brief thing on Dynetics. So basically, after came Standard Dynetics in 1969, where he decided to really fully crystallize the technology, and it became completely workable, and this is when they were doing the bridge Dynetics first. Then in 1978, they made some discoveries on clear, and they basically established that postulates are what will hold an engram together, and then if you get off the postulate, you can be guaranteed to go off the engram. And this was essentially the last refinement on Dynetics. And after that, this is the end of the lower levels, and then after that, you do the upper levels. If you're not clear, then you would do power processing, which, by the way, requires a very competent auditor. This is why there's no Class 7 course, there's only a Class 7 internship, because if you do it wrong, you will damage, you can almost, I would say, damage a PC, although you can always repair someone, but you can have bad result. And then after that, grade 6, and then eventually clear, which is level 7. And then you are clear, and then after that is, of course, OT levels. So I hope I didn't speak too long, and now will be the questions. So anyone's got questions?
I got a couple things here. Well, actually, I wrote quite a few things down here.
Throw in a new tape.
But I would just want to go over a couple things. One thing I'd like for you to go over maybe is the clearing on what kind or what types of auditing.
Right. Well, basically, if you look at
Like how could he go clear?
Right. Yeah. If you look at what clear is and what Elvish has said on subject and the research, one has to address the things that hold the bank together in order to achieve this. So if you do auditing that simply is not concerned with that type of auditing, and that will be objective processes and most of the great processes, although not all. I would not say that it is necessarily impossible, because I'm willing to examine cases that appear to validate this, but I would find this extremely implausible that someone would go clear on processes that do not address the structure of the bank, like Dynetics does, or the upper levels. I've had someone go clear on L10 once on the Scientology process, because L10 is an upper grade, and I'm not going to say the question here, but this was amazing. This person answered. It was a specific question. It was one specific question, and the person gave an answer, and the answer was essentially the clear cognition and the result of clear. And of course, that was the end of that L10. And so this, because L10 is one of the auditing designed to address directly the structure of the bank. So essentially, auditing designed to address the structure of the bank, someone could go clear on, and the auditing not designed to address the structure of it, I would say, I find it extremely unlikely, but since it's theoretical at least, I would be willing to entertain someone who had, but I would be very dubious. And if someone claimed to have gone clear on auditing, like on objectives or processes that are clearly not of that nature, I will be very eager to examine their folders and examine this and then make an adjudication on that particular case. Although I find it rather unlikely, and especially that there's a lot of people who have missing information on the state of clear in a free zone. There's a lot of material that LRH has written when it did the AO Review Auditor course. There are 100 pages on clear that are nowhere else. And you have a lot of stuff on this, and it truly explains what clear is. Also, they've censored most of the tapes on clear and the clearing congresses. They've censored most of them, removing most of the stuff. So unless you've listened to version of those that are more than 15 years old, you're likely missing a lot of stuff, and that's what happened to most people in the free zone. They listen to stuff. They only have one lone bulletin to determine clear, and that's not this.
That was the point.
and this is what, actually, you don't base a determination of clear on a lone Bolton. You base yourself on a whole bunch of different things, and it is just too complex to just say, like this. See, the achieving of clear is a very simple thing, but the determination of clear for everyone requires training.
Very good. Next thing here I've got down here is just a kind of a datum that the correct sequence of processes are probably more important than the amount of processes.
The what?
The correct sequence.
The correct.
You
Well,
know, like aligning,
I would say,
paralleling the mines.
well, you see, this sequence has been crystallized in the Great Chart from 1965 because it's been found to be the best way to do it for people. Obviously, prior to the Great Chart being developed, people got things upside down. I remember one statement that this woman made once. She attested knots, and she was an old-timer. She started auditing in 1954, and she was making a joke which the senior CS was a bit uneasy about it. She said, well, back then we did the bridge upside down, because what happened is one ACC dealt with problems, so they did problems until it came out of your ears. The next ACC course they did dealt with service facsimiles, and they did nothing but service facsimiles. Then they look at OWs, then they look at communication. So those people got wonderful gain, they got great result. I've even audited some of those people. And this is why Elrich came in 1965 with a bulletin of the rehabilitation of former releases, because that was designed for those people. Is those people got some of the grade EPs, and so the guy maybe got grade 1 and grade 3, then get grade 0 and 2. So then you do grade 0 and 2 on it. Of course, the best sequence will be 0 to 4, but if the person somehow got it the wrong sequence, it's not harmful, it's simply not the best optimum sequence.
Very good. One more thing you talked about, this case cracking rung down, that it was a fairly simple program. Would you consider training some people on that as a case cracking unit?
Absolutely. Actually, this is actually one of my purpose here is to, well, not specifically in this room, but in the so-called free zone, is to train people to be able to do that. Because what I said is that the auditor's skill needs to be, of course, at a certain level. They've got to be able to do reviews. So obviously, you cannot take someone who's barely at the level of auditing to be able to do that. But if someone has the skill comparable, let's say, to a grad 4 auditor, I believe anyone can be trained, because Elrich has said always, and I believe in that as well, that the quality and caliber of auditors solely depend on the quality of the CS. So therefore, the highest caliber CSs will turn out the highest caliber auditors. So since I had the benefit of becoming a high caliber auditor, I feel I can impart this to anyone who has a minimum of skill to be at a grad 4. And as I said, it's not very complicated. These are some precise rules. And obviously, for something like case cracker rundown, I think it's best to have both a team of a CS and auditor rather than an auditor alone, because sometimes it may be difficult, unless the auditor has a lot of experience, to take enough distance to really ensure that he does a full, complete approach on the PC, because it really requires a lot of experience from the CS to always make the correct adjudication, because some cases are easier to program, but some of them are bizarre or seemingly so. Because that's one thing that some people have asked me. There's some cases I've never heard of this. Even Class 8 said they never heard of a case like that. I can tell you, there's no such case I've never heard of. There's not a single phenomena someone has ever brought me, and I dare anyone bring me any phenomena that I cannot show them what can be done to address a case. I don't say that I have a one-shot answer to them, because some conditions are complex, but there's not a single thing, I believe, that does not have an answer. So to answer your question, yes, I'm very much eager to train as many people as one can be trained on that.
Very good. Anybody else got a question?
Well, I was wondering, if the grades are basically key outs, then why are they recommended to be done after somebody achieves the state of clear?
Because due to life experience, a person has many locks. See, the person has gone clear, but if they've gone clear, doesn't mean that everything in their case is gone. You see, the definition of clear is simply, the best definition I've found to give in general is the one given on the bulletin from 1980, I believe, where it says, a being who no longer has his own reactive mind. So even if you do not have this, there can still be aberration. And he explained in the bulletin the nature of a being, the various factors that can cause someone to still have Ks, in spite of having reached a state of clear. So because someone has Ks, and because he lives in an environment, and he has many years of doing aberrated things, he may still be in the aftermath of the things that went around him. I mean, he may have been raised to believe that it is wrong to talk to certain kind of people. That he's been, if you look, even if it's clear, he may still have habits, and those things that I mentioned, the facsimiles, well, even if it's clear, the server's facsimile is, as I said, the concentration put out by the person, not his bank. So therefore, one can have facsimiles and other fixed conditions, even if it's clear. Although you would expect them to be to a greater or lesser degree key out. And I remember when the bulletin first came in 1978 about clear, I observed that some people really showed that they had nothing to handle really on their grades, but some of them showed that they really had plenty to handle. And it depends, it's on a case-by-case basis, because even though someone reaches a state of clear, they may not be fully, I mean, it may sound paradoxical to someone that why would they not be very high on the tone scale at the time, but that's simply because a being is very complex. You see, if a being was very simple, the answer that Elrich has been looking for would have been found thousands of years ago. That's because a case is very complex and there are many things to handle. And even if you're clear, there's still other things to handle. So you simply have to use different tools to address them. So, and therefore some people are higher on the tone scale than others after they've reached clear, but they should of course all be a lot better off. Ideally they should be all very high on the tone scale, but in actual fact some people, for various reasons, may still be not quite so high on the tone scale. I hope I answered.
Thank you.
Good.
There another one? If you,
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Fine. We got about 5 minutes left.
Okay, good.
I'm wondering, as a person at the beginning of the bridge, should my priority to be should be to get clear as fast as possible, or to get the grades as flat as possible?
Well, I don't think one can be achieved without the other, really. Because you see, if you really look, the goal of Scientology is not to do the bridge, is to become free or more capable as a being. And the best way to achieve that, because the essential goal is your own self-realization. So in order to achieve that, one simply needs to take the best possible approach, the most effective approach. So the most effective approach would be to do the bridge correctly in the most correct sequence. And if for some reason it's not been done in quite the right direction, then to make the best out of it. It's the same thing as discovering that something you start to build is maybe not built perfectly at the bottom. Well, you can still make something very good and make it even as good as otherwise by doing the rest completely right. So, especially in a case, in the situation of a case, anything that's done wrong you can fix. So there's nothing that engraved in stone on the case. So I would say your priority would be to to simply say what you want, and I think it should be the responsibility of the author and the CS to decide what to do with you, because you simply need to make yourself available and give compensation as required for any service, and then you just need to ensure that you move on as fast as possible, and then the decision as to the best sequence will be made by the CS and author. They should ask you questions, do various interviews, find where you're at, what has been done with you, what you want handled, and then you'll tell them what you're interested in and what you've done, and then they, hopefully if they're well trained, they will guide you to the best choices.
Thank you.
Okay?
Similar question along the same lines. I have people ask me all the time, what's it better? Should I get my training, spend my money getting my training, or should I spend my money getting audited?
I would say the person should do both, because to make it to full OT, LH has made it clear, especially in later bulletins, that you cannot make it without being trained. Earlier on, some people, I mean, you can get processed. I would say again, it depends on the individual. If someone is really affected of things, feel oppressed by his case, has a lot of things they want to handle on their case, then I would say they might want to look at processing first. However, training itself can be very therapeutic because it's helping others. And actually, Ulrich has always said that the best way to make someone more sane is to make them help others. And actually, there are documented cases where people have been brought to sanity simply by making them train. And actually, at Flag, it was always proven a successful action that people who had trouble getting stable gain, they were told that before they could do more OT levels, they had to train first. And I saw some incredible differences. There was this girl that really, it was very hard to get her to make case gain, and she was a very fragile and RC breaking PC. And finally they told her, you got to get trained. And they didn't believe she was positive enough, but she found a way. And she came with a class 4 internship certificate to show. And she was incredibly easier to audit afterward, and really much better. And so I would say it's a bit of a case-by-case reason. One should do both, because you can do a lot of training on your own spare time reading stuff, you know, becoming familiar with things. So I hope I answered.
Very good.
I've got a question. ARC brakes. What is it about ARC brakes that just by spotting what the brake was, rehabilitates it or brings you back up tone versus say like locks or engrams where you got to run the whole thing?
Well, basically you want to key out an RC brake. That's all you want to do. So you find that's basically based on the RC triangle. So if there's a sudden break in AR, affinity relative communication, then the person is going to feel upset. That's bypass charge. But if you indicate that later part of the lock, which is the affinity relative communication, that is often enough to key out this, because see, you only look for a key out. This is why rudiments are only done to an FN. They're not